Today is November 28th, 2022, and this week there were 93 reported cases of COVID-19 in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg County, which shows a 27% decrease over the last 2 weeks. Therefore, each subject is comfortable not wearing a mask. Jenny, thank you so much for being with me today. I'm so excited to hear your story just because of everything that you've done throughout the pandemic. So thank you for being here.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So Jenny, can you tell us, just to start off with, like where you're from or where your family's from?
Yes. So I was born in Charlotte, North Carolina, so here. But my mom is from Venezuela and my dad is from Pennsylvania.
And tell us, what do you do for work or just extracurricular activities?
So I own a dance company called Rumbao Latin Dance, and we have been in Charlotte since 2013. And I'm now a full-time dancer and entrepreneur. Occasionally we'll work. COVID obviously put us out of business for a little bit, so I was working another job, but normally I do dance full-time. Before that, I worked in nonprofits.
Nice. So that must be a very interesting story to kind of talk about, having this dance team where you have a lot of contact, and then the pandemic hits, and I'm sure everything changed. So I want to make sure we hear that story. So could you tell us about the development of or just how things unfolded for you, your business, from, starting in the pandemic and then just throughout now?
Yeah. So it was pretty drastic, I would say. So the dance company, we teach classes to adults. We host events, so big social gatherings where people come from all over the state, even in North Carolina, South Carolina, to dance. And it's really just a big dance community, dance party. We dance all the Latin social dances, so salsa, bachata, merengue, cha-cha-cha. We're into Brazilian zouk, also, like all these dances that we have here. So, but we're quite busy before the pandemic hit, and I was in the midst of planning our anniversary party, which was scheduled to be on, I believe it was March 13th or 14th. And that takes a lot of months of planning. We had people coming in from Washington State, from New York, from the West Coast, because I was bringing an artist that was very well known to celebrate our anniversary. So typically on our anniversaries, we would bring in an artist from out of town to teach us a choreography, and we perform that at the event. So I think this was if it was 2020, we started in 2013, but I feel like it was our 6-year anniversary or so. And I had to make a decision that week as to whether to host the event or not. And so I think it was on Wednesday of that week, maybe Tuesday or Wednesday. Tuesday, I was talking with people that were kind of giving warnings about hosting events in North Carolina because of the cases that were starting to be showing in COVID cases, obviously. And there were other people like in New York. It's a small community, but you know everybody. So like I know the people in New York, I know the people in other states throughout the country. And so a lot of people were talking about, okay, you guys, we need to start thinking about what does this mean for our dance community, and if we want to protect the community, what are the steps that we need to take? Like, how serious is this? Because I think the government hadn't really made a decision yet. So we weren't required to shut down as of that time. But I knew like if I made that decision, it was going to affect everybody else that was doing events at the time. So after speaking with, he's like a doctor, kind of a biochemical engineer. He's involved in public health, and he was basically told me like you really should consider not having it, especially because you're having people come in from out of town. and you may be putting your community at risk. So I made that decision. It was super hard to make that.
Yeah, I think I can see like just how much it meant to you. I mean, I've known you. I've known you for a few years now, several years now, and ever since I've met you, I've seen your growth in the community, in the dancing community, and I know how passionate you are about it. And to celebrate something that you worked on for so long, I mean, I feel the sense of like grief that you must have felt.
Yeah.
In having to make that decision.
No, it was tough. But I think like overall it was the best decision to make. But yeah, I had a lot of angry people because they were like, I have flights, I have hotel booked, I have, because they were really excited about training with this artist. And a lot of them didn't really understand, I don't think, like the implications of what having that event would mean. So it was a tough decision, but I'm happy with that. It just makes me a little sad sometimes to talk about it. I didn't think it was gonna make me this sad, but yeah, they, thankfully, I was able to not have to like pay for the space. Like the ballroom was very kind in terms of like not charging us for the event space, and the airlines at the time I think were really good also about refunding or at least giving credit for the plane tickets. And I think a lot of people were not happy, but a lot of people were understanding. But I knew that like as soon as I made that decision, like everybody in the state was like, well, if she's not having her event, then we really shouldn't be doing our events either. And that was before like the governor was like, okay, or even Charlotte. I don't remember which one it was first, but I remember it ended up being like a series of, restrictions and shutdowns and stuff. So yeah, I was trying to find everything. Like I was trying to find masks. I was trying to like figure out a way to have it, but there was just no way to do it. Like there was no resources available, I think, in terms of like managing it, and people really didn't know like how bad it could be. So like it was hard to like make a decision off of or try to have it without the proper like information, I guess. So yeah, we canceled that, and then like immediately after we decided we canceled our classes that night on Wednesday. Thursday, I was just like trying to like book. I mean, I was trying to cancel all the purchases. Like I told people, if they needed a refund, I'd refund them, or if they wanted to save their ticket for when we have it. I said postponed, but I didn't know it was gonna take 2 years to have it again. But we didn't have the event until 2 years later.
Wow.
So
at that point it was what, like this 8th anniversary?
Yeah. Yeah, so it ended up being the 8th anniversary, and that was this year that we had the event. Actually, I think it was the exact time, March of 2022. But yeah, we kind of, it was sad, but we tried to like keep moving. So like literally the very next week, I was like, we're gonna have classes online. We didn't have class. If I'm not gonna have an event, I can't have class either. So we started offering the classes online. We were meeting on Google Meets, and we tried to keep the same schedule that we had. And I think it went well for like, at least a week or two. But I feel like people started to get tired of, being online. And I think there was so much happening that, everybody was going through a lot at that time. So I think it just didn't feel the same for, the community that is used to like coming together. And like really, I feel, even though I want to say like the main reason people come is to dance, like that's not really what they're coming for. They're coming because they want to be with other people. They want to see other people. They may not, like, to be honest, they may not have family here. So like dance becomes a way of them connecting with others. So I think when you lose that physical space, like they just were not into it. Like unless they're just really into dance, they weren't wanting to take online classes. So it lasted, I would say, maybe a good 2 weeks, and then we saw like a very quick drop in pretty much everybody that was coming. And we had a good amount of students. I would say we had like probably 50 like regular members, like close to that range of people that were consistently coming. And we are offering at least, 12 classes a week or so. So we had a lot going on before everything hit. And I think at that moment wasn't sure like how long this would last. I was kind of like, I think like everybody were like, okay, well, is this gonna be a few weeks? Is it gonna be a few months? Like, how long is this gonna be? And like, what's this gonna look like for us? So I think there's definitely my dance partner and I, like, we were very, anxious, and I think there was a lot of anxiety in terms of how we were feeling of like, what's this gonna look like? I know my dance partner, he's been dancing since he was 18 years old.
Wow. And how old is he now?
He's 42, maybe 41. But yeah, like he's now 40, so he's been dancing over 20 years, and that's all he had ever done. Like he'd only danced. He started when he was 18, and he had worked in a ballroom, and then the ballroom owners kind of like up and left, and he started his own business at that time, like very young, and he's only worked for himself since then. So for him it was devastating, because if you can imagine, like something you've lived off and you've done for years, and now you can't do it. Like it was really hard for him. It was hard for me too, but I know like I have a degree, and like I have things I can fall back on, so I wasn't super worried about, I guess, my livelihood. It was more like, this, sucks that I can't do what I want to do. But I knew like eventually if I needed to do something else, I could. And I think in his case, it was kind of like, oh, I've never been in this position before. Like I've always been able to do this, and I've never, like, this is like kind of a natural disaster, like you can't really control it. So it was a rough period of time, but I think he became like very excited also about the virtual aspect. So like I was telling you before, we had to learn how to set up a mic, and like my brother he works for Morse Jenkins. He does like their media, like social media and stuff, but he also studied film and TV and radio, so he had like access to a lot of equipment that he was able to let me use. So we were able to use like lighting and like and I had like a camera, but he would let me use his camera and things like that. So we would set up like a pretty nice setup for like virtual classes, but we weren't really getting the people there. But I know like everybody was trying to do the same thing at the same time. But it was interesting because we would get people that wanted to take our classes that weren't in Charlotte. So it kind of gave them an opportunity to do it. We just didn't have like, what we needed to kind of like survive off of it like we normally would. Because we depended on a lot on the classes, and like the events were, our monthly event was a bigger thing that would produce income, as well as like performances and things like that. So now that we didn't have any of that, we had to like kind of adjust. But I would say, I forgot what it was called, but they gave unemployment for self-employed people at some point in time, and that like was what really helped us out. So I think it was the state that decided to do that, but they were pretty generous with unemployment. And typically, like if you're self-employed, you don't qualify. Like gig workers, I think they called it. So we were able to apply for that. And once we got that, we started offering classes for free. So because we weren't really making any money off of the classes anyways, and then now we're getting some type of income, we just decided, okay, we're gonna offer these classes for free and just keep like doing something so that we don't feel like we're just not doing anything. So and that was my partner's idea. He was like, we should still offer these classes so that people have access to them and they know that we're still here.
That's what I was gonna say. I think that was such a brilliant move because you don't want to just like drop off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
And having to rebuild that community, I'm sure would have been much harder had you not done that.
No, yeah, I think it was really helpful, and I think it kept morale up also because we kept doing stuff. It was like, it's a little disheartening when you're like, okay, you're just like teaching one person is there, and like, or maybe like nobody was there. You don't know who's there because we were doing a live, and sometimes there'll be like nobody on the live, and then sometimes we have a lot of people on the live, but everybody was doing lives, so it was kind of like hard to, I think, grab people's attention. And I think, like I said, I think people got tired of just being on screens.
So I have several questions, and I want to make sure that I ask them before we move on with everything else. But I want to go back a little bit into the planning of the event, the 6th anniversary that you were planning. I know you talked about people being angry from having them cancel a lot of the planning that they had done, individually as well for this event. How did those relationships continue? And did they continue once that kind of happened? Because I'm sure that also affected your business.
Yeah, I would say, most of the people that came from like out of the state, I didn't really have a relationship with them. They had more of a relationship with the artists that I was bringing, and that's why they came. So for those, I don't think it affected too much. I just made sure I gave the refunds as promptly as possible, and told them like, I'm really sorry, and I think it was fine, but you could see like they weren't happy, or they let me know that they weren't happy. So, but I feel like I did what I could. Will they come to another event? I don't know. Did they come to the event? Because I ended up rebooking the same person, and a lot of the people that had made plans before, they did not come the second time. So it did affect it somewhat, but there wasn't really much I could do about it, and I tried to let them know as soon as I could. It wasn't, it was definitely last minute, because I think one person had flown on the Wednesday, so they were actually got to Charlotte, and I had to be like, I'm sorry, and like they were really upset, but I was like, I'm really sorry, you can't have it. They were coming from Washington also, which was like where it was like starting. So but I think overall it was okay. I think some of our partners, like there were some club nights that we would do where I was very vocal about like, look, I'm shutting everything down, like you guys should be too, and they were not wanting to, because I get it, like you're losing a lot of money, like you're losing a lot, so I understand, but I felt like this is our community, like we should protect it.
I think hearing you talk about the decisions that you had to make, it's like I have such a fondness and admiration for you, because I think that a lot of the times there's difficult decisions, right, that you have to make, and for you to have put so much more value in the people in your community and thinking about the long-term effects of it, like that's a really hard decision to make. But I commend you for that, because it's like you said, like other people weren't doing it, but you did lead that decision making,
Yeah.
And it's inspiring to see that through your story.
Thank you.
Yeah. Um, so one of the things that you talked about was about the free classes that you then provided. Another thing to admire you for, because you could have easily not chosen like to say, well, I have this money, I don't need to work, but you didn't. You kept on doing something that you loved, and you provided a little bit more for people, regardless of what the situation was. So did that draw in people, or did you see a difference in offering something that was paid for versus something that is free?
To be honest, it didn't bring like as many people as we thought. I think we were hoping it would. It kind of kept the people that were like had already been paying us, like the few people that had been paying, they kept coming. But I think the community that we serve is just much more in person based. And like I realized that, with the pandemic, I was like, okay, I realized that this community, and there's nothing wrong with it, they are not really wanting to learn how to dance. And that sounds bad because that's what I offer. But I think what we do offer more than just dance is that in person, like community and connection. And I could tell very quickly that that's really all that the people that we were serving were looking for. And there may have been a few that wasn't the case for, but I could see that, because even when the classes were free, those same people were not attending them. It was people that really were from out of town that just never had access to us that were like, oh, I want to take your classes, and this is cool that I can take them now. I had one lady from London. Like, it was kind of crazy. But, I think it just showed me like what the focus of, and I mean, I think it speaks directly to kind of what I've focused on also, because when I advertise the classes, or when, we have classes or events, it's very like family oriented and very community based and very like welcoming and very open. And it's not like, if you can't do that step, like you're not supposed to be here, so I think it's not like a traditional dance space where you may think of like, oh, if I can't dance, I can't do it. So I think I created that. It's not a monster, but I did create that environment so that people were like, anybody can do this, and I think anybody can. So I feel like, with me and my dance partner, we both created that space where it's just like, this is some place, my dance partner says like, we provide happiness, we don't really provide dance, right? So in that same thought, like when you're trying to provide just dance through a video, it's gonna be a lot different. Even though like, my dance partner is super engaging and like happy, and trying to transmit that through the screen, which he did, but it's not the same, as like you being able to like hold someone's hand, or like be in front of somebody, or feel that connection, because also we teach partner dances, so that's very difficult to do without a partner. And there are certain things like you could work on, but there's only so many things that you can do before someone's like, okay, this isn't really what I wanted to do, so I made it challenging.
So you have a partner, and it's you. Do you have any other staff?
Yeah, so most of the people that work with us, they're not like full-time or part-time, but I would say like menos, like less than part-time. like once a week they teach a class, or 2 times a week, but they really have, their other jobs that they do. So for them, it wasn't like they were losing like a full-time gig, which thankfully, like I would have felt really bad in that case. But it was really just me and my partner that worked full-time. And my partner supplemented a lot of his income with private lessons. So he would teach a lot of privates. But thankfully, like the staff that we had that was teaching, they didn't really, I mean, they were losing obviously a little bit, but not not like their regular.
Their primary income.
But yeah, I feel like, they were still supportive and they were still trying to do what they could, but eventually it was just me and my partner, Eduardo. So.
Were you able to maintain the same staff throughout the pandemic? Yeah.
Well, when we stopped offering the classes, it was really just me and Eduardo, because we were just willing to do it, so we were the ones teaching. After the pandemic, after we started offering classes again, we didn't add back anyone until 2021.
Oh.
So we started teaching solo classes, like where we wouldn't have any partner work. I think it was late 2020. We started offering some classes where they had to wear masks and they had to come in. They had to, I don't know if we made them test. They may have had to test too. We put up like a whole bunch of restrictions and we limited it to like, I think it was like 5 people or 10 maybe, like very small classes, like they had to spread out, so we tried to offer some in person again, and that was like late 2020 when we started doing that, but with like restrictions, and those restrictions were based on the cities or the state's restrictions, so it was like gatherings under 25 people, I think, and then 6 feet apart, masks. So like we made sure, like as soon as the state allowed, we did whatever those restrictions were.
And how did that go?
They were well. I think people were ready to come back, even though some people didn't like it, like how the format of it.
The rigor of it.
I think it did attract new people that just had never done any dance, that were like wanting to try it but wanted to do it in a safe space. So I think it did attract some of the old students, but more like new people that didn't have like a notion of what it was like before, and I think that's important. So some people like have their idea of like, okay, this is how it was before and this is what I want, and then there's new people that like don't know. They didn't know what it was like before, so whatever we had, they were like, oh, that's cool, so I think it gave us a lot of different people.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Mm-hmm. Okay, so going back to how things developed, you offered the free classes, and you were, well, actually, let me ask you this. So you weren't doing the dancing anymore full time, but then what did you do instead?
So I think we did unemployment for I know we did it till at least September of 2020. So I think we started in May. When they started giving unemployment, it was like May or something, and then we took unemployment until September, and that's when we started the in-person classes. We're gonna start the in-person classes, and then we just did like a couple of them to see how people were feeling. I don't know if it was September, it may have been later, but I know that we definitely went to it may have been October, I don't remember. But yeah, we did whatever we were able to do with the restrictions, and then I saw a post for contact tracing through the state health department. So at that time, I decided to apply for that position. And when I received that position, I told my partner, Eduardo, I said, look, this job looks like it could be like a good job for us to do. In the meantime, if you want to try to do this. And so he applied and he also got it. So we ended up both working with it was a contract position with the state health department. And we were calling people that had COVID following up with them, see if they had any contacts, and then call their contacts. So that was supposed to be 2 months. So we started in October 2020, but then we just got laid off when it was October 2022. But yeah, we ended up doing that, and that was very helpful because just like the unemployment, it was giving us, income. So obviously, if we took the job, stopped unemployment. But then the thing about now having a job is it limited us in like the time that we had to do the dance stuff. So we were still doing dance stuff, but it wasn't as like involved because we just didn't have the time. We were both working now full time, but we did continue to offer the classes.
And now, do you feel like, I know you just recently got laid off,
Yeah.
but are you so excited to kind of see how it'll grow again?
Yeah, I definitely feel relieved because I felt like it was like a weight on my shoulder. Like that was very helpful to me, and I'm very thankful for it. But also it was a lot, so it was kind of hard to do both things at 100%. It was definitely difficult, especially when, I think with the waves of COVID, we saw the waves of attendance also. So like whenever the cases went up, our attendance went down. So we would see those waves. So initially we were only offering like 1 class a week or 2 classes a week maybe, which is a lot less than what we offered before, and we could only have 10 people in the class maybe, based on our size of the room, I think. And that was, the end of 2020. And then the beginning of 2021 is when I think they lifted some more restrictions and we started offering actual partnered classes, but they had to bring their own partner. So normally we would switch partners. And in these classes in the beginning of 2021, up until probably mid 2021, we did bring your own partner. So if they felt comfortable dancing with each other, then they could dance with each other, but we were still masked up until that point. But we weren't offering like a ton of classes. It was just kind of like, and they would have to sign up for like a 6-week program. But at that time we were still working, so we didn't really try to like build up too much beyond that.
So at first it was going on to Google Meets, and then eventually free classes they were able to offer. Then came back and did just very like minimum, allowing whatever the state allowed, which I think you said between like 5 to 10 people, and it was only there wasn't any partner work. Eventually you did partner work, but people had to bring in their own partner. And then what was the next phase?
After that, I think once more restrictions were lifted, we were able to add more, something more like we used to have. But we started to have, I feel like it wasn't until after the summer of 2021 where we started to have some semblance of like what our classes used to be, in terms like we were getting a lot of people signing up for like this. We would sell like a 6-week program, and we had it really structured and like monitored and how many people could come. So it was kind of nice because then we would say we only have this many spots, so like if you want to do it, then you have to sign up. So it did create like a, what do you call that, demand for the classes, because I think people were starting to get tired of like, okay, I want to do something. So even if that means I have to do it with a mask, like the people that were coming to us, at least they were doing it. And I know there were other people doing stuff and they weren't following the rules, so there was like, people we lost, I think, a lot of like our previous clients to schools that were kind of operating just like they were before. Which like I knew it was gonna happen, but it didn't bother me. It didn't really bother me that much. I knew like it's not for everybody, and I felt best following the guidelines. So for me, it felt better. I would rather lose people than to not be safe. And I think the people that came to us appreciated it. Like they were like, "Oh, I'm glad that you're doing this because I feel safer here," and that made me feel better, even if I know like we lost some people in the process. But yeah, after the partner, bring your own partner, then we started offering just more classes, and eventually we stopped wearing masks. It was a while. It took a while, though. I think once the mask mandates were lifted, but we did tell people like if you do feel sick or if you feel don't come to class, I would give refunds. If people were like, hey, I can't come, I got COVID, I was very good about giving them refunds so to encourage people not to come sick. Um, or if you like think you might be sick, wear a mask. Or if you've been in contact with someone, wear a mask. So I feel like our community did a good job following those guidelines. And we hosted our first social in May 2021, which was a big deal because now it's like doing the socials like a bunch of people. And I think that happened when the state lifted the restrictions again, and I think the max gathering was 100 people. So I only was like, okay, we can only have 100 people at the social, and it was sold out. Like our first socials were sold out because I restricted them. I also made them wear masks, which people didn't like. Some people didn't like, but other people appreciated. But the social was a big deal to have a social again because we hadn't had any for a year, and it felt weird to do it because it was like we haven't had a social in like a long time.
Wow.
And I know like other people had done like some outdoor things, like some people had done like outdoor socials and stuff. But I think when we did a social, it was like okay, like it's starting to come back because we kind of waited. We waited until like we were allowed to do it. But it was good. It was nice to be back like in a space with a bunch of people again, and I think it gave people that sense of like community again that I think they had missed. Um, but it was definitely like a little nerve-wracking at first, thinking of like, oh gosh, like what's gonna happen here, because we actually got laid off for like 2 months from the COVID job, because that's when the cases dropped a little bit. I think it was like May, June. We got laid off in June. We were off June, July. Then the cases rose up again in July, and they asked us to come back. So we had a 2-month break, and we went back to. But that's when like again we saw the correlation between cases and like people coming out, which is normal.
So right now, are you back into the same place that you were before COVID?
So our structure is a little different now. We tried to implement like the same system that we had, like a membership-based system in November. I think it was like November, December last year. And I think it's almost there, but because we like kind of combined two different things, we're doing more than we were doing then, and it just looks a little different. So it feels like it maybe not as as much as it was, but it's just I think because we're a little more spread out in terms like we're offering more classes than we were before the pandemic. But that means like less people in each class, so it looks like it's not as many people. But I would say like we've had a lot more attendance at the socials. Like I would say typically we had at least 100 was a good amount of people. Like a good social was like 150 people maybe. Our anniversary would be like 200 people. people because like that's more people would come. A low social would be like 60 people. But since we started doing the socials again in 2021, we haven't had under 100.
You haven't had 100.
We haven't had under 100.
You haven't had under 100.
So like we haven't had like a low
number
since COVID because like I think because people are just like we're so ready to get back. And like we're really I think right now we're the only one that hosts a regular social in Charlotte beyond like a club night. So a social for us is like in a ballroom or a studio. There's not a bar, it's just music and a dance floor, water. We provide water. You know, people bring some drinks sometimes, but it's really just like a dance party. So I think there hasn't really been that outside of like a club setting. So people really have, I feel like, appreciated it and taken advantage of it. And like the past 3 months, we've had over 200 people in our social. So I feel like they've grown. Just this past one was like 150, and it seemed lower because the other ones were like so many, but that's to be expected. It was a holiday weekend and stuff, so but I would say like we have more people coming to the socials now than before the pandemic.
Nice.
So that's good.
Yeah.
In classes, I would say it's harder to tell with the classes just because we're offering more of them. But I would say it's either like at the same or above. In terms of performances, like I don't know if you saw, I posted like a stats of like what we did for that Latin Heritage Month.
I didn't see it, no.
But I can share that with you. But the amount of requests that we had this year was triple probably what we've ever received.
Wow.
In previous years. So in terms of like performance requests, we did 30 performances in a month.
So wow, that's like one per day.
Yeah, pretty much. But it wasn't one per day. Like some of them were 2 per day, and then we'd have like. But it was a lot. Like it was a lot. Sorry, that was messed up. But yeah. So we had a lot of requests. And most of those were like corporate requests, but some of them were schools, universities. Most of them would hire us for an hour, but in total it was like 35 hours, I think, that we did. And we had, at least 8 dancers that we were able to pay. Not like for each one, but like for, some of them they wanted more dancers, some of them we'd have like 2 or maybe 1 or up to 8, so it was really cool. And that I'd say has grown a lot.
Well, one of the things that you have is a performance team, right? Can you tell us about that and the change of how that was?
Well, obviously during the pandemic, the performance team was non-existent. We didn't have one. We did a few challenges where like people would learn like a footwork choreography and perform it like on a video, and then we did a few virtual performances where I think the Latin American Coalition put that on through Telemundo, but basically instead of having the Latin American Festival, they asked us to do a video, and they compiled like videos of everybody. So we did that, but we were all masked for that too, and we did everything outside. But really the team didn't get back together. The performance team, like we haven't really gotten like our core team back together, but we started a partner team in 2021. I think we started that back in like May of 2021. And that team has pretty much stayed together since then. And those were the main people that performed, I would say, like all the events that we did. And we kind of threw them in there because like we weren't expecting. A lot of the people that requested performances, they were people that had asked us before, but we had a lot of new people that had never asked us before. So we were getting a lot of requests, and that team, like they're not technically like a professional team, but they were the team that we had to work with, and they were really,
Could they tell the difference?
Maybe people don't notice. I don't know. I mean, I can tell the difference, but I feel like they were prepared as much as they could be for the amount of time that we had, because a lot of the requests were kind of last minute. We didn't have many that were like ahead of time that we could prepare for. So I did let people know, like, look, if we had more time, we could do more. But we do know, like, I mean, I'm hoping that we get the same request next year. So I told the team, like, we'll be preparing this year for those, basically for that month, because it's pretty much that month that we get like bombarded with requests. But I think it's because we offer more than just like salsa. Like, we do some of the cultural dances also. Like, with salsa is a cultural dance, but more of like a social dance, and then there's like more of the folkloric side. So we do like Venezuelan folkloric and a little bit of Colombian and Cuban. So we're trying to, but we have a lot of we have a few girls that are from Mexico that do folkloric Mexican too. So we may be getting into all of the different countries.
And did that come out from COVID?
Yeah, I think I've always, when I was younger, I did Venezuelan folkloric dance, so I've always been interested in it, and we've kind of made it a side part of Rumbao, because I know that's not what most people are interested in, but it is something that's important to me. So I've made it a point to like at least learn some things myself. And then I have a few people on the team that are also interested, and so that helps. So then when we get asked to do a performance, is usually the only time that we use it, but it's nice to have the option to be able to, and to be able to represent it, because most of the time the performances they ask for like salsa, or they want a lesson, to involve people. But then there's others that are more cultural based, where they're like, we want more of like a cultural dance or a cultural presentation and background. And I feel good that we can like provide both of those things. But I would say I was offering it before, but it definitely has increased since the pandemic. And I don't know if this is something, when I thought about it, I was like, I know there was like a lot of, during the pandemic, a lot of talk online about, representation and cultural representation. And I don't know if like businesses were like, okay, we gotta like do more, and then that's why they have reached out more. But I feel like maybe that had something to do with it, which isn't a bad thing. It's a great thing.
Yeah, I definitely saw more of that throughout the community, for sure.
Because I know, like, pre-pandemic, I would get a lot of requests. Can you do this for free? Or can you do this for exposure? Or, like, there would be a lot of those types of requests. And, like I really received none of those this year. Like, all of the presentations that we did, I said, this is our rate. And they were like, okay. Or they may have been like, oh, can you do this? And I'm like, yeah, we can do that. But I was very surprised to see that, because that wasn't typical of, I guess, how people would approach us before. And I don't know, we did do a lot with our website, and we did build up a lot of our presence, so that could have helped with like maybe us looking more professional, or people taking us more seriously on a professional level. But I definitely didn't receive. I did maybe from like a middle school, which that's normal, because I know public schools don't have any money, so
Yeah.
I don't count those, and we do those all the time. But as far as like everybody else, I was very impressed at, their willingness to like be supportive financially to art, cultural arts groups, which was nice, was really nice.
All of this is so interesting to hear, and just how a lot of things have changed that you don't think of that will change a lot of the aspects of what goes into dancing and a business and all of those things.
Yeah. No, I mean, the other thing I would say that the pandemic really helped us with was really building the website to make it easy for people to buy online. And once we did that, it like I think that also like really changed our business, because before, you know, people would just buy with card or cash, and now it was nice to be able to say, okay, well, you can buy ahead of time online, save time, you know, at the door, or I'll offer you a discount for buying online. So then, you know, they make sure they buy before. But having it really easy and like people just can go there, that I think that really changed how we were operating also.
So it sounds like almost like, did you have the time now to put in more time to that?
Yeah, and I think the necessity created it, right? So like we're trying to, okay, how do we offer a class with, you know, only a certain amount of people and limit contact? So in the beginning, like it was like a need that we needed to fill, because if we want to give class, then we need to make it contactless. How do we make it contactless? They buy online. You know, how do we limit? We limit the amount of passes they can buy online. You can only buy online, and that was a change for a lot of our older clients, like that had been coming, because they're like not used to that. They're like, I have to buy online, I have to go on the website. Like, yes, if you want to come to the class, you have to buy online. And some people didn't like that either. Like a lot of the changes, you know, the people that have been coming before, that they were used to like Venmoing me, or like, you know, like I'm not taking Venmo anymore, because even though that is an electronic form of payment, like it's not going, the website actually keeps track of like everything very nicely, and like organizes it, so I can see we got a certain amount of people from this class and this class, and in Venmo I'd have to like go and look it up. So I feel like we became just more like, okay, this is how we're operating, and you can choose to, if you want to come, this is what you have to do, you know. And I think before I was like, we'll take whatever you want to do. You know, like before we were like, okay, we'll do that for free, or like, yeah, like we'll do this, you know, like we were more open to, and not that we won't do things for free, but what I mean is just we were more accepting of just like whatever was coming towards us, instead of being like, no, this is how we want to operate, and this is how we want to do things. Because, and I think the restrictions actually like played a part into us providing that, which is funny.
But I was gonna ask if there was anything that because of the more time that you had from not dancing, did it allow you to do anything to build your company in any way? But then I thought about the fact that you took on another job, so it might have just not, that time might have just not been there.
I think like it did happen, just like I said, because of the restrictions and us like trying to find a way to work with them. So like naturally it gave us a little bit of that building, but I do think that the job prevented us from like going beyond that. And at some point, my partner, he took on a boot camp to learn like cybersecurity or something, because he was like, we weren't really sure, like it still wasn't like we were making like what we were before. So I mean, it wasn't until 2 years later, I feel like, that we're actually like getting back to a point where we were before the pandemic. So he decided like, I'm gonna try to get something just in case like this doesn't work out. So he was gone for like 6 months from classes, and I was like teaching them myself, and that was a point when like it got really busy, because like more people, like I think that's when the cases started to come down, and more people wanted to come out, and I was having to add classes because like we were still restricting the numbers, and so we started adding classes, and that's when I added back, you know, a staff member that we had before, and thankfully he was able to do it with me. But we were pretty busy in the summer of 2021, and that's when I started to see like, okay, this is starting to build up again. Um, and then we hit, you know, it went back down again for a little bit. But another thing that I didn't mention is once we got that job, we pretty much decided, because I founded Rumbao with another group of people originally, and as they like stopped being involved, it was more because it became more of a business and not so much like, not that it's not fun, but it is fun, but there is also a business side of it that you have to think about, and it becomes more responsibility. So it's just hard, I think, when if it was just your hobby, to transition to that. So like naturally people just fell off. But when Eduardo came in, he wasn't really like a partner. He was kind of just working with us. And I think with the pandemic, we kind of had to like start over anew. And when we got the job, we decided we were gonna save any money that we made from the business to go towards a building or a space. Because right now, what we do and what we've done is we just rent hourly from a studio, which has benefits because then, like during the pandemic, we weren't responsible for space, which saved us a lot. Like if we would have had our own space in the pandemic, it would have been very bad. So thankfully we were just renting hourly. But it also, in that sense, also like it's harder to build like a home because like you know, you're constantly having to go from one place to the next. It's not like your space. I can't put anything up on the wall. I just come in and I leave. The other benefit is that you don't have to clean it or repair it or do anything to it. You're just there and you leave, you know, so it's kind of nice. But we did have like the dream of having our own space, which we didn't really, like, I didn't think was possible before the pandemic because things are very expensive in Charlotte. So for me, it just made more sense economically to just continue renting, and like when we don't need it, we don't pay for it, which is what happened. But for Eduardo, he had already owned his own studios before, and he knew the benefit of like being in a space all day, you know, or being there, like having access to a space all day where you can do classes and like offer more. Because really, like we limit ourselves a little bit because we're just like, okay, these hours. So since October 2020, we've been saving, not taking anything from the business. We pay like staff, but we haven't taken anything ourselves until now. Well, until now because we don't have the job. But we were able to save up like a good amount of money to hopefully go towards a space, which we're still looking for. But that's like our goal now. And nice. We applied for the building Beyond Open grants. I don't know if you heard of those, but it's through the Foundation for the Carolinas, and it's supposed to be for capital assets. So like our goal would be not to like rent a space, but to own a space so that we don't have to worry. Because really we've been through this where we've even renting hourly, where a studio is like, okay, well we can't be in this building anymore, so then we have to move to another space. And you know, we've done that a few times where we're like, we would rather just like be able to be somewhere. We have a community that's consistent. It would be nice to offer a consistent space, and I think that would just make it stronger. But it may take a few more years, but we're going. We're getting there.
Yeah. It sounds like a good direction to go into. Mm-hmm. Wow, I'm so excited to hear just where all of this ends up being as well. Mm-hmm. And I wish wish you good luck with everything
Thank
that's
you.
kind of going on. It sounds like everything's, kind of moving in a positive direction,
No,
an
definitely.
exciting direction too.
Definitely.
So we're like at an hour, and I don't
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to, I just want to make sure I respect your time.
Mhm.
So, but before we end, I want to make sure that, I capture everything that you kind of wanted to voice. So is there anything else that you want to share with us?
I think, well, just a recap, I feel like, definitely the pandemic hit us hard as it did everyone. But I think it presented like a lot of really good opportunities and challenges that helped us grow more overall. And I think, I don't know if it's just Charlotte. I feel like Charlotte has done a good job in terms of really trying to support artists and art. And maybe I've been put in a place where I can receive that. I don't know if that's what it is, but I do feel very thankful for like just the community in general for just supporting and providing, because I don't think there was as many opportunities before. But I do think now like more businesses are aware of the importance of like cultural arts or cultural art education. So I think that's been like really cool to see. Um, but yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I'm just really thankful for the work and being able to do something I love.
Yeah, and I thank you for being able to willing to share this journey that you've kind of been in, and ideas too that you bring to the table with the Living Archives and just in general to the community. So thank you for being here and letting us hear your story.
Of course, thank you.